following is a presentation of Learfield IMG College. From the Georgia Southern Sports Network, powered by Learfield IMG College.
Wings up, Eagle Nation! Touchdown, Georgia Southern!
This is Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Eagle athletics.
Taking a look through all the other action in Georgia Southern athletics this past week. A lot of road action. A lot of teams hitting the old I-16 out of town.
Getting on the steel horse and taking us to parts north, south, west, wherever. Can't really go too much farther east.
Now let's return to the Learfield IMG College studios. Here are your hosts, Colin Lacy and Danny Reed.
That's a fact, Jack.
Welcome into another edition of Inside Eagle Nation, back in Statesboro, and here in Statesboro to stay for a little while, as a matter of fact. Colin Lacy alongside the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed. It was great this past week to be able to catch up with a couple of our buddies on Inside Eagle Nation for another round table as we got set for the Sun Belt Conference Tournament. Had Mike Hammett from ULM, Matt Present from Appalachian State, Jay Walker, along with Brad Topham from Louisiana. Congratulations to those two. They will be heading to a regional with their victory in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game. We will dive into the full Sun Belt Conference Tournament recap, and there's a lot to recap over the past week, but we will look ahead to the 2022 Statesboro Regional.
I can't believe we're even saying that.
Georgia Southern being teamed as one of the top 16 in the college baseball world and are hosting a regional. Came out earlier today, actually last night on the way back from Montgomery, Alabama. Came out that Georgia Southern would be hosting a regional. You didn't know. You felt pretty good that most of the time the regional hosts are the number one more often than not, even though Louisiana did do it a couple years ago as a number two.
Yeah.
But you felt pretty good you were going to be a one. You didn't know who else was going to be a part of it. You had the selection show earlier today over at the FOC with the team. Came out that the 2 is going to be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, that a lot of people thought were going to be a host in their own right. Some had them even as high as a national seed in the top 8. But Notre Dame going to be coming to Statesboro along with Texas Tech as the 3, and then UNCG rekindling an old SoCon rivalry, coming back as the 4 in the Statesboro Regional. But that will start Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday, if necessary, for a championship game on Monday. It's a double elimination tournament all the way through, and we'll get to double elimination a little bit later when we talk about the Sun Belt tournament.
Yeah, we tried that earlier this week, and it didn't work out.
Yeah, this one will, though. Trust me. Only 2 games per day. You can go to gseagles.com and get your tickets. They've got the All Sessions Pass, a really good price, by the way, for an All Sessions Pass. When you look at it, you get 2 games each day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then possibly another game on Monday if necessary is necessary. But we're going to cover a lot today as we get through the Sun Belt Conference Tournament, get into the Statesboro Regional. We're going to have Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball and the great job that they do with their staff joining us a little bit later on this evening. But first, we dive into the news and notes for Georgia Southern Athletics.
That's a heck of a tease to bring all that up, and then we can't even talk about it. Yeah.
We'll get there. Just stick around. We'll get there. Don't you worry. But you look at what is going on around Georgia Southern Athletics. We've mentioned it the last couple of weeks. Really, the only thing still going outside of Georgia Southern baseball is Georgia Southern golf. This past week, Georgia Southern out in Scottsdale fighting for an NCAA championship. Ended up not making the cut of the top 15, but you did have a Georgia Southern individually going into the top 9 that is not part of the top 15 as far as the teams go. Mason Williams advancing, and he is still playing out in Scottsdale right now, a couple hours back of us, but he is through 9 in Scottsdale and has bumped up 13 spots. He is tied for 19th in the individual side of things. He is 6 over, and that sounds a little bit misleading. 6 over, he's only 6 shots out of 3rd and 8 shots out of 1st.
He's had a really good close. I think we talked about that last week. Ben Carr has gotten a lot of headlines, but Mason Williams had been right there for much of the year. His last 6 weeks have been just amazing to watch him develop. He made All Sun Belt Conference, part of getting to the league finals again, and of course a major part in getting this program back to the national championship tournament.
So the Georgia Southern men's golf as a team making it to the Scottsdale portion, the NCAA Championship Finals, but not making the first round of cuts. It took the top 15 after the first 3 rounds. Today they will whittle it down a little bit more and get into the top 8 rounds, and then they will start match play tomorrow and Wednesday to declare a national champion. But after today, they will crown an individual national champion, and Mason Williams, again, still in the hunt for that for Georgia Southern as well. But huge congratulations to Carter Collins, and I know we talk about it a lot. We've got our own Carter Collins section of the podcast.
We do.
It's almost called the Carter Collins cast, but when you look at what what that program continues to do year in and year out, it is incredibly impressive.
It's a factory. The way that he has been able to locate, cultivate, and watch talent grow. It's Stephen Fisk moving on to play professionally. It's going to be Ben Carr moving on to hopefully play professionally. And you bring in talent, especially from this area. He has recruited so exceptionally well, being a South Georgia guy, and we've given him a lot of credit in that respect a number of times on this podcast. But you think about when they're at a Sun Belt tournament, the goal is, of course, to win the title, just like we're going to get into with Eagle baseball. But knowing that you're in the national tournament is a comforting feeling, even if you can't secure that first memory. You know that you're going to be playing against the country's best regardless, and then you take it even a step further, like we're hopefully going to get a chance to do with Eagle baseball after this coming weekend. But this program, we have said it before, by far the most consistently successful program in Georgia Southern athletics. It is no surprise what they do, and it will not be a surprise as they continue to ascend as one of the top programs in this country.
Now that it's official for Georgia Southern baseball being in a regional, we felt pretty good about it the last couple of weeks that Georgia Southern would be postseason bound no matter what happened in Montgomery. But now you've got the opportunity to definitively say 3 teams for Georgia Southern have made NCAA postseasons just here in the spring.
First time it's ever happened.
That is unreal.
And when you also think about what just happened last Thursday with the groundbreaking for the Jack and Ruth Ann Hill Convocation Center, the second major groundbreaking that's taken place in barely a month with the indoor practice facility, the Tippins Family Indoor Practice Facility over right behind Paulson Stadium. It's happening really quickly.
Yeah.
And look, some of these buildings are going to take a while. The IPF is likely going to be up sometime during the following summer, and then the Convocation Center maybe a couple of years once they get that officially rolling. But where we have already come these last 2 years, it's going to get a whole lot bigger and better. And as we continue to see the rest of these programs hold up their end, do your part, and everybody can reap the successes, Georgia Southern baseball hosting a regional is a monster part of how we're going to continue to evolve and continue to improve as a department.
There's a lot of really cool things going around Georgia Southern athletics. We're going to talk plenty more about the Statesboro Regional coming up in our last segment of this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. Again, we're going to get Kendall Rogers' thoughts. He's the D1 baseball national writer across all of college baseball. If you haven't heard of D1 baseball and you're a college baseball fan, you're missing out, and I don't understand how you haven't, but do a fantastic job with he and his team covering the game of college baseball. But you look at what Georgia Southern was able to do this past week, and I know it wasn't the end result that Georgia Southern wanted, but this was a crazy week. You go to Montgomery on Monday. You know you're not playing Tuesday because that's the play-in round. You had Appalachian State taking on Little Rock, and ULM taking on Georgia State. Both of those ended up being upsets. The 10-seed ULM upset the 7-seed Georgia State. 9-seed App State upset the 8-seed Little Rock. So then you move into Wednesday. Georgia Southern's supposed to play at 12:30 local. 12:30 against Appalachian State. We wake up, about to go talk to Coach Hennon for our pregame interview, and he said, pump the brakes. We might not be playing on time. We knew weather was going to be in the area Wednesday, and it looked worse on Thursday from the radar at the time. And so it was more of, okay, hang on. We know we're not going to be playing on time. We don't really know when. You sat around for the majority of the day not really knowing. We went to eat with some of our buddies at Dreamland, which was fantastic, by the way. We ate well this week, if that's a surprise to anybody. Yeah, no, right? But you sat there, and then it would come out that games won't start until at least 7 o'clock on Wednesday.
Uh-huh.
And then it came out that the coaches were going to meet at 5 o'clock to decide what this was going to look like. At that point, we had gone to the ballpark about 2-ish. No pun intended. But we had gotten... I didn't even... Yeah. We had gotten over there just to see what was going on, and there were some puddles in the outfield. The tarp's still on the field. It had just stopped raining when we had gotten there. After seeing everything unfold, that's when everything came out. 7 o'clock would be the earliest start. Coaches were going to meet. You didn't feel great that you were going to play that night, but you still didn't know for sure. I mean, you look at some tournaments across the country, they'll start games at 10 o'clock if they have to.
Yeah.
Georgia Southern being the second game, you knew the later games were probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
But Georgia Southern was kind of on that fringe, and so you go all the way up until about 6:30 local that you don't know if you're playing or not. It would eventually come out that it was moving to a single elimination part of the bracket, and it would not start until Friday. And so the rest of what you had left of Wednesday was wiped. All of Thursday was wiped, and then you knew you picked up essentially the same schedule on Friday, but now it's single elimination. That was a crazy about 24 hours over in Montgomery.
And it was just so frustrating having to sit there like we were all in an airport waiting for delayed flights that were not going to take off. They ended up being canceled flights in some way. But we sat with our friends just going over scenarios, waiting for some word to come after we knew that call was taking place with every head coach that was still in the tournament and also the league officials to figure out what was best going to benefit the Sun Belt. We had heard they had tinkered with a number of different options. They didn't want to go single elimination. They wanted to try to protect the integrity of a double elimination format. They also talked about pool play with the 8 teams left going to 4-team pools, taking the tops out of that and then going forward to go single elimination and then play for a championship. Ultimately, though, with the amount of time that they had and the number of games they had to play for the sake of safety and the teams that were going to represent this league, because remember, 4 got in, as announced earlier today. So you want to make sure that you've got all your guns ready to fire. Single elimination was the best way to go. It set up really well for Georgia Southern, considering that they got App State in Game 1. When Coastal got upset by Troy, you got the lower seed in the semis, and I know it was an hour away from Troy, and a lot of their fans made the trip up rightfully so. Georgia Southern had a much more conventional path to get there, while a Louisiana had to knock off an always tough South Alabama team, then go through number 1 Texas State, which had won 11 in a row going in. They had nearly blown it against ULM the day before, but they came back late. They knocked out the Warhawks in that prior matchup, and we'll talk about the actual game between the Eagles and Cajuns in a minute. The league got put in a tough spot because if you would have gone and it would have rained, then you would have been just in a bigger pickle. You had to wait.
And the part that I don't think people realize, if you play that first game, I think it would have been the Coastal and Troy game. If you play that first game, assuming you're under double elimination, you have to finish double elimination.
Yeah.
You can't start that game, have coaches and players thinking they've got double elimination under their belt, and then come back and say, no, we're knocking it down to single elimination. And so you've got to wait. We saw it in Statesboro where they tried to do the split sites. One site was not able to go. The other one was. You had to hold up on both because you can't have some teams playing as double elimination and then make a change afterwards. So I think it was not the most popular opinion from the Sun Belt Conference to do this, but I think this was one of, if not the only option that the Sun Belt had in order to do it, because you knew Thursday looked awful weather-wise. Wednesday was not great. Could you have played a couple of games? Maybe, but there was not nearly enough time to get all the games in that you needed to get in.
I'll give you a bit of a comparison. We're going to talk about UNCG and what the Southern Conference had to do with its tournament, but bad weather wiped out their first day in Greenville, so they ended up sticking with double elimination, but UNCG had to play 6 games in 3 days. They won the tournament. They won the tournament, and they had to come out of the loser's bracket to do it. So they swept doubleheaders on consecutive days just to get the chance to be the 4 seed and come to Statesboro for the regional. What are they going to have left? We'll find out starting on Friday. But with the way the SoCon handled it relative to how the Sun Belt handled it, you've got to feel good about the Sun Belt and its 4 teams being as ready as they can be for the SoCon. Only the one team, Wofford, was probably going to be in at that point as an at-large, but with all the bids that were getting gobbled up, Wofford ends up missing. They were one of the first 4 out of the field when they were a slam dunk for almost the entire year, save for Championship Sunday, because UNCG needed to win both of those games. They did win both of those games. Mercer was in the field for a while. Their RPI got too low. They won 41 games. They got bumped out. They are not in consideration. They did not make the 64-team field. But the way the SoCon handled it, the way the Sun Belt handled it, 2 very different ways to eat the same pie.
Dive into these games individually. Georgia Southern getting the victory 7-1 over Appalachian State. Ty Fisher muscled through 4 innings of work, only gave up 1 run, did walk 3 and struck out 2 over 83 pitches, but Jay Thompson came in and was exactly what you would expect out of 26. 3 innings of work, just 1 hit, shutout baseball, over 41 pitches, and Anthony DeMola looked really good over his final 2 innings of work against the Mountaineers. That would put Georgia Southern a date with the Trojans of Troy in semifinal action, an 8-0 victory over Troy. Garrett Gaines got the start for the Trojans, goes 4 2/3, 1 unearned run. And for much of this game, it was a 1-0 lead for Georgia Southern all the way up until the top half of the 8th inning, and it reminded you so much of that game in Conway that Georgia Southern had 1-0 over Troy. The only run was an unearned run on an error by the shortstop. There was a lot of similarities. I think we talked to Tyler Owens after. He goes, man, that felt like Conway.
He threw the 6th shutout that day. Nick Jones threw the final 3 to get the Eagles into the title that day to play Coastal. But yeah, until the Eagles found a way to get to the rest of the Troy bullpen, they came up with 4 in the 8th inning. They got 3 in the 9th, doing quite a bit of it with 2 outs because that's been such a major storyline this year. Got their first shutout since whitewashing Georgia at SRP Park the day before the shutdown in 2020. 8-0 final to set up another trip to the championship, 5th time in 6 years, and who waits on the other side but one of the league's best programs and the Ragin' Cajuns.
You know, we shouldn't have been surprised because I think it's in the Sun Belt bylaws that at some point in the Sun Belt Conference postseason, Georgia Southern and Louisiana have to meet, and you hadn't up until this point. But we've talked about our friends with the Louisiana Sports Network. Jay Walker, Brad Topham do a fantastic job. I'm glad they are able to continue playing baseball. I would have rather had Georgia Southern playing with a Sun Belt Conference championship under the belt, but we'll get to that later. But Brad sent me a text early in the morning on Sunday and put it pretty well. He goes, I've never cheered for a team so much throughout a week just to hope they lose one game. And that's really what it was, because you were kind of cheering for Louisiana as you go throughout the week. You were hoping they kind of upset South Alabama. You hope they upset Texas State. And then you're like, man, Louisiana won. Crap.
Yeah.
Now we've got to face them.
And look, the games in 16, 17, 19, 21, especially the last 3, absolute barn burners. Those last 3 went extra innings, and we joked, well, this one's probably going to go extra innings, and it almost did. Yeah. Georgia Southern was with a whisker of doing that and maybe even walking off, but it was an awesome game to watch. Eagles jumped out early thanks to some firepower. They hit 3 home runs against Jeff Wilson, but I'll reference something we talked about really early this year. The most deceiving play in offensive baseball was the solo home run.
Yeah.
Because you leave the park, you got some momentum, you only got 1 run out of it. It's just as effective as a squeeze. It's the same kind of result. And it finally caught up when the Cajuns started to rally. Their reliever, Bo Bonds, shut down Georgia Southern after a couple of hits to begin his outing. Cajuns tied the game at 5. Jarrett Brown comes up in the 8th inning, go-ahead sac fly after finally getting back to some hits against Bonds. Austin Thompson's double into the left field corner nearly untied the game there, but then even getting the first out of the 9th, you're 2 outs away with a 1-run lead. It brought back memories of 2017 in Statesboro where South Alabama rallied to force extras, then they walked off. But the Cajuns just stuck with their game plan. They got a hit-and-run single, then they executed the double steal. Got the go-ahead double from Veillon. It was his birthday on Sunday to drive in the game winner. And then you get 2 outs, bottom 9. And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, somebody just try to get into one here. Not necessarily just keep this going, but it's Jesse Sherrill up. We know he only has 1 home run. Had a phenomenal tournament, one of 4 Eagles that got all tournament nods. Bouncing a little ball up the middle. DeBarge had gotten to everything in the tournament. Somehow he couldn't get his glove on it. Sherrill reaches. Jason Swan's not a big walker. He walks, wild pitch, second and third. So now a base hit wins you the title with Avan up. Avan walks on 4 straight. I think that's happened this many times maybe in his 5 years at Statesboro. And then even so, you get your top RBI guy and the league's top RBI guy who had hit a homer and a double earlier that day in Ledford against Talley, who was pitching for the second time, but he was pitching for the save, something he did a year ago, but of course we know now he was their number 1 starter. Unfortunately, he only needed 2 pitches, fly out end of the game, Louisiana dogpiled, and I hate the fact that this team is now 0-5 in title games since 2016, but the fact that they keep getting there is such an accomplishment. It shows you how they found a way a number of times, and if the events from a couple of hours later didn't happen, it would have been soul-busting for this group.
Yeah.
Because these guys have now lost 3 title games like Curry McQuarter before from 2021, but you get a little bit down the road away from Montgomery. Noah Ledford talked about this on the bus. It was as quiet as could be. We weren't on it, but I can only imagine what it was like for those guys. And then they get the notification that not only was Georgia Southern in the field, Georgia Southern is hosting a regional for the first time ever. Been to 2 College World Series, but this is the first time that a regional is coming to Statesboro. I can't tell you how big that is for this school, this town, this county. It is such a big thing.
You look at the other teams that are hosting a regional, and you and I were talking about this after all of the regional sites had come out, and you put Statesboro and Georgia Southern in this group, in the same company, in the same sentence. Tennessee, get to that later.
Yeah.
Stanford, Oregon State, Virginia Tech, Texas A&M, Miami, Oklahoma State, East Carolina, Texas, North Carolina, Southern Miss, who's going to be joining the Sun Belt next year, Louisville, Florida, Auburn, and Maryland, and Georgia Southern. To be honest, that's not a conversation that Georgia Southern is in very often in very many sports. Baseball is one of the few sports that Georgia Southern would be hosting a NCAA postseason.
You know, I thought about the 2017 Georgia Southern men's basketball getting the CBI, but even so, you were hosting a Utah Valley, and if you don't know college basketball, you probably weren't even sure what Utah Valley was, and after that night, everybody found out what Utah Valley was.
Pick and roll.
The idea that Texas Tech and Notre Dame are coming to Statesboro, Georgia for an NCAA national tournament, that is mind-blowing.
This is a Notre Dame team, and we're going to talk about it with Kendall Rogers in a little bit. This is a Notre Dame team that D1 Baseball thought they were going to be a national seed, one of the top 8 to host a super regional.
And they probably should be hosting.
Right, they should be.
They should be.
But that's not the point. The point is a team that has done what Notre Dame has done is now, and I don't want to say playing second fiddle, but they are the 2 seed in Statesboro behind the 1 seed, Georgia Southern.
And the fact that they were sent here, because let's be honest, Georgia Southern was the 16th of the 16 host seeds. We know that. The fact that they're being sent here shows how close they were to being a host. And really, they probably should have been host. That doesn't mean that Georgia Southern can't still win this regional, but they're going to have to go through the gauntlet to do it.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that UNCG now coached by Billy Godwin. The old head coach Link Jarrett is at Notre Dame, so I'm sure that they'll get a chance to tangle at some point this weekend when all get to town. But it's a UNC team that's been hot as wild these last few weeks. Of course, we talked about their run in the SoCon tournament. Texas Tech has one of the best players in the country in Jace Young, the second baseman. He might be one of the best infielders anywhere. And then with Notre Dame, may not see this pitcher, but John Michael Bertrand, their left-hander who two-time first-team All-ACC, he's an Alpharetta guy. He went to Blessed Trinity. So if he gets a chance to pitch in this ballpark, I would think that not only are the Fighting Irish fans that are coming here going to enjoy that, but plenty of people from the Atlanta metro area will be down. I really think that this is going to be a sizzling and raucous atmosphere regardless of who's between those white lines.
Talking to folks around Georgia Southern Athletics, tickets are going fast. Go online to gseagles.com. Call 1-800-GSU-WINS when they open up tomorrow morning. But we'll take a kind of a step back, look at the field from a 100,000-foot view. Tennessee, the number 1 seed, you expect that. Georgia Tech going to Tennessee. That is the regional that Georgia Southern is paired with. So if Tennessee wins, Georgia Southern wins. Georgia Southern heading back to Knoxville to recap the rekindle that on old Rocky Top.
Yeah, we've done that one once.
Yeah, we're not going to dive too much into that right now. But Georgia Tech, the 2 in the Knoxville Regional. You look at some of the other ones. Maryland to host. They are hosting Wake Forest. Texas State being sent to Stanford. Texas State being a 2 in that Stanford Regional. They will open up with UC Santa Barbara. Binghamton also in that one as well. Vanderbilt being sent to Corvallis. I don't know what they did to them.
Yeah, we were thinking for a while.
UCLA sent to Auburn.
We were thinking for a while that Vanderbilt might come here, and there'd be a chance that former Benedictine standout Carter Holton would pitch in this ballpark, which would have been another storyline, but that's something that we don't have to deal with now.
Louisiana as the 3 being sent to College Station. They take on TCU and Oral Roberts along with Texas A&M. Kennesaw State in the Southern Miss, Hattiesburg Regional along with LSU and Army. Got a couple of others. Georgia being sent to Chapel Hill for the North Carolina Regional. And then Coastal Carolina, the 3 seed in the Greenville Regional, hosted by East Carolina. They're in there with Virginia and Coppin State. Any surprises?
Well, the 4 teams from the Sun Belt, first time that's happened since 2013. Major win for the league. It's only going to get stronger next year when you add an Old Dominion and a Southern Miss. I would have thought Georgia or Georgia Tech would have been coming here. And yeah. I almost think that we expected that. We almost had it written in pen on some of our predictions, being able to reach out to some of our friends with the Yellow Jackets and Bulldogs.
At least one, if not both.
Yeah, you were thinking so. And even if Georgia Tech didn't go here, I would have thought Auburn might have been a geographical fit, but the way the committee works, they've got a lot of different things they got to consider relative to strength of schedule, to RPI, how you did non-conference, was that strong enough, how well you did in conference play, and that's what makes Notre Dame's a mission from hosting even more concerning because they finished second in the Atlantic, got to the ACC semifinals after they won their pool. But I love the fact that we are just having this conversation because usually this is the saddest podcast of the year because we're talking about losing in the championship game and not having anything else to talk about unless it's men's golf, not having anything else to talk about until football begins sometime in August. But we know that there is at least another weekend of Eagle baseball coming up, and the fact that it is here. You get 2 of the marquee programs. Notre Dame was in a super last year, lost to eventual national champion Mississippi State. Texas Tech has been to 4 College World Series in the last 8 years since Tim Tadlock took over. It is a loaded regional.
Oh, yeah. One thing, I want to piggyback on what you're talking about. The committee came out and said that there was more of an emphasis on your non-conference this year. We talk about it all the time, how Georgia Southern schedules, how Rodney Hennon has always scheduled since he's been at Georgia Southern. You have to play good teams to not only get better, but put yourself in the opportunity to do this. Now, a lot of things have to fall into place. There's a couple of series that you weren't necessarily banking on being good series that turned into a lot better series as the year went on. You think of that William and Mary series for Georgia Southern. You think of a Miami of Ohio. But it goes to what Coach Hennon has been saying for 23 years here in Statesboro of you have to put yourself in the position to be able to do this. Georgia Southern not only put themselves in the position to do it, they did it, and now that's why you're being rewarded with the 16th seed. And we're going to talk to Kendall Rogers here in a few moments from D1 Baseball. And he's very adamant. This isn't the committee throwing Georgia Southern a bone. This is Georgia Southern owning a regional, being deserving of a regional, and that's all there is to it.
You're a top 16 national seed in a year where a lot of bids got stolen, but Georgia Southern, outside of a blip here, a blip there, very consistent season.
And it's extremely rare, unless you're an SEC, maybe an ACC, and even those are kind of few and far between, to not win your regular season or conference tournament championship and be a top 16 team.
2 victories over Mercer, beating Georgia Tech, among many other marquee victories, keeping the RPI in the top 20 for basically the entire year, getting as high as number 2 in a number of different instances, currently holding right now at number 11. Notre Dame is going to come down. They're the number 13 RPI team. They've been in the top 25 for much of the year. UNCG, a team that had to win 5 straight games to get here, but that's the opponent that we'll cover during our final segment. Texas Tech, we've talked about their successes coming in as a Big 12 at large. This is the moment that this program has been building towards. They probably thought it was going to piggyback a Sun Belt championship, but you're in at large for the first time in 21 years because your regular season business was handled. You go 23-7 in league play, haven't done that since 2000. And then you beat marquee teams when they were marquee teams, but also your non-conference teams got better as the season went on.
Yeah.
And that made your schedule stronger. And it got the Eagles to a point where this could even be a possibility.
Again, we'll dive into each of these teams, Notre Dame, Texas Tech, and UNCG, as we continue on this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. But we catch up with the managing editor of D1 Baseball, somebody that puts a lot of heart and soul into the game of college baseball. Kendall Rogers joins us on this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. We continue on this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation, a big college baseball day as the Field of 64 gets announced. The sites for the college in the College World Series and the regionals getting announced yesterday. The Field of 64 getting announced today. Again, we found out that Georgia Southern going to be one of the top 16, actually the number 16, and host a regional. Came out today that number 2, Notre Dame, number 3, Texas Tech, and number 4, UNCG will be coming to J.I. Clements Stadium in Statesboro. Who better to talk about the college baseball world than Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball? Appreciate you joining us.
You got it, man. It's good to be here.
Talk about this regional. You guys have had Georgia Southern as a host for the last couple of weeks. Bounced out, I think, about 3 weeks ago, but have, for the most part, for in these projections that you guys do every week, have had Georgia Southern as a host. What makes Georgia Southern a top 16 in your eyes?
I think the biggest thing for me when I look at Georgia Southern, just the sheer consistency. And really, when I talk about that, I talk about the whole top of the Sun Belt. You look at Coastal Carolina down the stretch, played really well. Mainly when you look at Texas State and Georgia Southern, both of those teams played really, really well the entire season. And I think if you're the committee, it's good to reward those kind of teams, and it's good to reward teams that go out and play people. The thing that Georgia Southern did, we kind of heard that from committee chair Mike Buddy today, the thing that Rodney did is he went out and played really good teams in midweek, played Tennessee opening weekend. You know, he got his feet wet against some really good RPI teams, and that certainly has helped the Eagles down the stretch. So I think when you look at what they did in the Sun Belt, they got the road series win over Texas State. They took care of business in some midweek games. They deserve to be a top 16 seed. And I was glad to see it because there's so many years where, you know, the quote unquote kind of upper mid majors, they don't get the benefit of the doubt. Like, you know, if they're in the mix for the top 16, you know, they tend to side with kind of a power conference team. So I like the fact that Georgia Southern's in there. I think it's awesome to kind of to have a regional to place, you know, like Statesboro. When you look at the pictures of the ballpark and it's absolutely beautiful. The aesthetics are outstanding. And then you look at the teams that are in this field with Notre Dame, Texas Tech, UNCG, obviously Red Raiders and Fighting Irish, kind of the 2 brand names. That's going to be a really, really exciting weekend. And hopefully GSU fans come out in force to support that team.
Talk about this field for Georgia Southern. I know Notre Dame is somebody that you guys were kind of surprised weren't a host in their own right. Texas Tech, a team that slides into the 3, and then UNCG. Talk about this field and what Georgia Southern's going up against.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think the biggest thing, starting out with the Spartans of UNCG is Billy Godwin is a guy who, was at East Carolina before he went to UNCG. He's always had, kind of the right formula in his program. He certainly has UNCG going. If you remember Lee Jarrett, who's now the Notre Dame head coach, who's in this field, he used to be at UNCG and did a really nice job there. So I just think when you look at UNCG, the thing that stands out to me is the job they did offensively in those final two games against Wofford, another really good SoCon team. They scored double-digit runs, I think, in those two games against I think it was 9, and then double-digit runs in the last game against Wofford. That tells me they can be very offensive, especially as you get deeper into a regional. I think Notre Dame, for me, what's really interesting about Notre Dame is we talk so much about the job that Zach Prajner and guys like that do offensively for Notre Dame. But how about the job they've done on the mound at times? There are weekends throughout the year where Notre Dame's pitching staff has been phenomenal, and John Michael Bertrand is kind of that guy for them. And I don't know if Georgia Southern will see him, because my guess is he starts the opening game against Texas Tech. But, he's one of the better arms in the ACC. So the thing about Notre Dame is they're really well coached. Lee Jarrett does a phenomenal job. This is now 3 straight full seasons that Notre Dame has had a very good team. I expect him to come in here pretty hot because they thought they should have hosted. I think they should have hosted, and not to the detriment of Georgia Southern, but I thought they should have hosted over someone else. And they're going to be coming to this weekend with a chip on their shoulder. And so that's Notre Dame. Texas Tech, again, a brand name. Tim Tadlock's done a phenomenal job. This is probably worst is the wrong word, but this is probably his least talented team. Yet here they are back in the postseason, and here they are finishing, top 3 or 4 in the Big 12 once again. I think the big thing for Texas Tech is, the issues they've had at times this year is when you get past Brandon Birdsell, which Georgia Southern won't see Birdsell because my guess is he'll start the opening game. Once you get past Brandon Birdsell and Andrew Morris, I mean, there is a big drop off pitching wise for Texas Tech. Offensively, not quite the Texas Tech teams of the past. But, when you look at Jace Young, you talk about star players, a guy that'll be a top 10 draft pick here in less than a month now. He's a phenomenal player. The big thing for teams is you got to keep Kurt Wilson and Jace Young from beating you. If you can do that, you can beat Texas Tech. But this is a fun field. I think it's awesome because it's one thing to host in Statesboro, and it's another to, instead of getting, and no disrespect to these teams, but there's a difference between getting like Columbia and Campbell and getting Texas Tech and Notre Dame. People that go to the ballpark this weekend, they're going to get their money's worth.
One thing that kind of surprised us about this field, Georgia Southern expected to see either Georgia or Georgia Tech in this field, Georgia Tech going to Knoxville, but it seemed like there's a lot less of the regionality kind of playing a factor this year.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think when you look at this field, the field as a whole, frankly, there are a lot of interesting, placements, right? I mean, you look at like Auburn with UCLA going there. I mean, UCLA going to Auburn, like what? You got Arizona going to Coral Gables. So in a way, I kind of like it. I think we get hamstrung so many times of just making this all about regionality. And I'll be honest with you, I think if I'm Rodney Hennon, I think I like this field as opposed to getting Georgia and Georgia Tech, because what happens if Georgia is playing Georgia Southern in a final game? All of a sudden, you got people in black and red and masks going to Statesboro to root on the Bulldogs. So I kind of like this. You're giving Georgia Southern its host, and you're not allowing someone else to potentially kind of try to run in here and run the place. So I actually like sending those two schools out of state.
Talk about the Sun Belt Conference as a whole. Turns into a 4-bid league this year with Louisiana getting the win in the title game yesterday over Georgia Southern. Coastal Carolina, we kind of thought was on the fringe. They end up being in the field as well. So 4 teams in the Sun Belt Conference, and really good to see the Sun Belt get back to a multi-bid lead.
Oh, there's no doubt. This league as a whole is trending so far up right now. If you look up and down this league, and I know they didn't have a great year as a whole, but they started off the year great. Like Georgia State, I think is a program that the brass drum ball has moving kind of in an upward trajectory. You look at Louisiana and the job that Matt has done there. I think them getting back to the postseason is big. This is a team I thought was actually going to be really good coming into the postseason. I don't know if they're really good just yet, but obviously being able to beat the Eagles in the championship, that tells me they've got that kind of potential. Troy Skylar Meade in his first year, how about the job that he did? They made some noise there in Montgomery. Then you look at Georgia Southern, Coastal, Texas State, and then even South Alabama. And then, oh, by the way, next year you had Southern Miss. This is a league that was really good this year, this is a league that as they add Southern Miss, it's going to continue to get better and better and better. So I love where the Sun Belt is. The thing about the Sun Belt is, it might be quote unquote an upper mid major, but this league as a whole and its fan bases as a whole in this league really, really care about college baseball. And I think it shows in the talent they're able to accumulate, and it shows in the commitment that these administrations are making to these programs.
Kendall, I know it's a busy day for you and the rest of the staff at D1 Baseball, but really appreciate what you guys do for the game of college baseball. And I know you've got some more people on Twitter that want a piece of you.
Yeah, exactly, man. Everybody's coming after me today. You can follow me, Kendall Rogers, on Twitter. I'll be honest with you. I love seeing Georgia Southern as a host. It's not one of those things where they were gifted a host. They went out there and earned it. They did the trick in non-conference. They were consistent during the regular season, and I'm really happy for Rodney and that staff because they've put together a resume that deserved a host, and they were rewarded for it. So again, I hope the fans come out and pack that place this week, and that team deserves it.
Kendall, appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, guys.
Once again, that's Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball.
Kendall Rogers hates your team.
That's a good dude. That is a really, really good dude that knows the game of college baseball. If you don't know the story behind D1 Baseball, go and look it up. The fact that Kendall Rogers pretty much built D1 Baseball from the ground up just because, to be honest, there's not a whole lot of national attention on the college baseball world. He saw a void, and boy, they fill it. Do a really good job over at D1 Baseball. Appreciate Kendall taking the time to join us tonight.
I would hope that with the potential deregulation that's going to take place with the NCAA's Transformation Committee, that a sport that has only been gifted 11.75 scholarships is now going to get a chance to be on a more level playing field. And look, that could be the big boys loading up even more and making it difficult for teams like a Georgia Southern, Louisiana, Coastal, Texas State, and whomever else to get into the postseason and potentially host. But the fact that you have that potential now instead of being shackled by so few scholarships where a football, a basketball, even a volleyball gets more scholarships than a baseball does. But I know that's because of Title IX. That's more than okay. But the fact that a sport that can be a revenue-producing sport didn't have the kind of coverage that Kendall and team have been able to develop, it has become a vital part of how it is now viewed nationally.
He's a really good dude that really appreciates good baseball and really appreciates this Georgia Southern program as well. We dive into what the Georgia Southern and Statesboro Regional looks like. Again, Georgia Southern, the host, the number 16 national seed, the number 1 seed in the Statesboro Regional, the 2 seed, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, 3 seed Texas Tech Red Raiders, and then the UNCG Spartans bring up the rear in the 4 spot. We'll kind of take these teams one by one. Georgia Southern will be facing UNCG in the first round. Again, a double elimination format for these 4 teams in the regional. You got 2 games Friday, 2 games Saturday, 2 games Sunday, and then the if necessary for the championship of the regional will be on Monday if that's needed. 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock will be the games on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then I believe a 6 o'clock first pitch for the Monday game if that's necessary again. But Georgia Southern will have the 7 o'clock game on Friday. The 2 o'clock game will feature Notre Dame and Texas Tech, and that's going to be a really good game. First, we'll dive into the number 2 seed, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Finished 35-14 on the regular season. 16-11 in ACC play. You've got a number of really good hitters in this lineup, a team that's almost hitting 300 as a team, scoring a good bit of runs. But the ERA for this team is something that's really spectacular. 3.91 ERA. We've talked about it many times. Under a 4-team ERA is really good in the game of college baseball nowadays. But John Michael Bertrand is somebody that's fantastic. 8-2 the record, a 2.39 ERA. He will get his 15th start at some point this weekend, and if you're Georgia Southern, you're kind of hoping it's against the Red Raiders at 2 o'clock on Friday.
If it is, and it's him versus Birdsell, I would want to be in that ballpark at 2 o'clock on Friday to watch that.
Oh, we will.
For somebody else that's thinking about it, I would want to be there. Let that be your primer for Georgia Southern and UNCG.
Yeah,
but
let that be the little warm-up.
When I looked at Notre Dame a little bit more closely, it reminded me a lot of Florida State. Because Florida State has a great pitching staff, but 2 starters where you probably rely on. Bertrand, of course, gets the spotlight on him like a Parker Messick does for Florida State, the Nationals leader in strikeouts. But if they hit a little bit, they let their defense and their pitching do the rest.
Yeah.
Not a lot of games relative to the rest of the country. They had a number of cancellations during the season. South Bend, Indiana doesn't get great weather, regardless of what time of the year you're talking about. But that is a team that, like Kendall mentioned, is going to be highly motivated because they have to travel down here and probably deal with gnats for the first time.
That's a good point. You got 5 guys in that lineup hitting over 300, leading RBI guy on this squad. You've got 2 guys tied with 42, Carter Putz, and then Brooks Concy with 42 RBIs on the year. Not necessarily as a team running a whole lot. You've got a couple of guys, Ryan Cole, a lot of speed in the top of that lineup, but a really balanced and what looks like a really good lineup.
And Ryan Cole, along with Bertrand, was named All-ACC, and this is a team that, as we mentioned, finished second in the Atlantic. It's very difficult to have a record over 500 in the ACC because it is a collectively good league. That's why it's one of the best baseball leagues in the country. As good as Georgia Tech's offense is, they finished dead even in conference play because they couldn't pitch and they had some troubles with their defense, and who knows, maybe that's a team that Georgia Southern will see in the Supers if it happens to pair up that way. But for Notre Dame, the fact that they did not get a chance to host after what happened to them a year ago, they still went to a Super. For guys that have been around for both, I'm not sure I want to be Texas Tech in that first game. It's going to be a great pitching matchup, but I've got to think the Irish are even more ready to fight when they come to Statesboro this weekend.
Move on to the number 3 seed in the Texas Tech Red Raiders out of the Big 12. 37-20 the record, 15-9 in Big 12 play. It's an ERA for this team as a whole over 5, but Big 12 kind of known as an offensive conference. There's a lot of really big sluggers in this league, but Brandon Birdsell, a 3-even ERA, 8-3, and 102 strikeouts in 78 innings of work.
The interesting thing about both of them is that they both play on all turf fields.
Now, true. I didn't think about that.
Coming to an all-natural, you'd have to go back individually and see just how much, if at all, they played on natural surfaces. It is a switch. Now, some would say going from grass to turf, it's difficult because it's going to be quicker. But maybe if you're turf to grass, you're thinking, okay, that's going to move more as quickly as I'm used to, but maybe it doesn't. But that'll be something that they'll work out once they get down here. We've already mentioned with Young, but also with Texas Tech, Tim Tadlock's teams have always been able to hit.
Yeah.
And we have heard for years that if you have to go to Lubbock for a regional or a super, care who you are, good luck, because they are nuts. And those are the people that are going to be invading Statesboro this weekend. Luckily, it's a J.I. Clements and not having to deal with going out to Northwest Texas. But they have been so good because they have so much support. They have a bought-in program, a bought-in fan base because of how Tim Tadlock has shifted them into the national spotlight.
Offensively, we talked about Jace Jung being one of the top hitters in the country, really. He's going to be a top 10 pick. 340 average, 56 driven home, and 14 home runs, getting on base at almost a 50% clip. This is a Texas Tech team that will hit, almost hitting 300 as a team, a lot like Notre Dame. But this is a team that gets on base. They're getting on base at over 40% of the time. This is a team, and again, one that doesn't run very much, just 29 steals as a team on the year. But they get on base, and they make you make mistakes.
And with Young, he was the Big 12 Player of the Year last year. He may have been in the discussion this year if Ivan Melendez wasn't hitting better than 420 with 29 home runs and maybe the National Player of the Year. I know how good Kevin Parada has been for Georgia Tech, but I think Melendez may have that one locked up. With Texas Tech, high on-base percentage as a team, and when you're a squad that's also hit 83 home runs, you can not only potentially small ball your way. That doesn't mean you bunt because they don't bunt a lot. You could potentially do that by how you flood the base paths, but you're looking at a lot of potential for multi-run homers, and that's the plays that really swing games. For Georgia Southern, 3 solo home runs in the title game against Louisiana. Great to get the crowd on your side, but it's only 1 run you're getting. Texas Tech with 83 bombs, a lot of those are 2-3 grand slams, and that's how they can take momentum right back from you, even though they did fall in the Big 12 semis over the weekend.
The 4 seed is the champion of the Southern Conference. This one a bid stealer as well. 34-28 the record, 12-9 in SoCon play, but having to defeat Wofford twice on Championship Sunday to be able to do so. It's a lineup that is hitting well, over 300, 311 team average, getting on base well. They'll run a little bit, not a ton, but a really good offense that you know you're going to see.
At the 311 team batting average, second in the conference, 10th best in the country. We play Mercer twice a year.
Yes.
We always marvel at how high so many of their guys rank in the SoCon in terms of individual categories. Now, a lot of it's because of the ballpark. We know the ball jumps there. It's very short to right center. UNCG is the team that Mercer's constantly fighting with for all those categories. So we're going to see how the other side lives a little bit. But a lot like Mercer, the top 5 guys in this batting order all hitting at least 330.
Jeez.
They've got Hogan Windish, a second baseman who was named SoCon Player of the Year. He's got 16 home runs. You usually don't associate the power numbers with second baseman unless you're talking about Chase Utley, a Jeff Kent, guys of that ilk. Top of the order, Kennedy Jones, the freshman, leads the conference in RBIs. The leadoff guy leads the conference in RBIs with 73 of those. He had 17 in those 7 games in the SoCon tournament where they had to come out of the losers bracket. So it's clear that they know how to get guys on base and score them. Pitching-wise, they had to stress a lot of their top arms over the week because they had to win multiple games in multiple days. Mentioned how they had to beat Wofford twice on Sunday to win the championship, so I don't know what they're going to have left and how they're going to piece it together, but I do know that Austin Parsley is probably the guy that Georgia Southern is going to see. He's been the number 1 the last 2 weeks. They have the SoCon's Pitcher of the Year, reliever Alex Hoppe. He has a sub-3 ERA. Opponents are hitting under 200 against him. He got knocked around by the Citadel in the conference tournament and did not throw after that victory over the Bulldogs 3 days before. But somebody you've got to think is going to be in the discussion if UNCG has any kind of difficulties with its starting pitching, which is probably going to be Parsley on Friday.
The reoccurring theme that you see throughout this regional, what does the depth of your pitching staff look like? Kendall just talked about it. Texas Tech past the top 2 have been suspect.
Yeah, it's iffy.
Notre Dame past the top 1, maybe 2 have been iffy. UNCG past the top starter and top reliever has been iffy. I think that's what's going to stand out this weekend. Who has the pitching staff that's going to really stand up? Because you've got some pretty good offenses. Probably maybe one of the top offensive collective regionals this year.
Outside of Tennessee and Georgia Tech, but hey, that's just ironic.
But that's just 2 out of 4.
That's just Campbell Kennett. Zach Netto's a really good shortstop. But this grouping of teams with UNCG, I feel like either one of 2 things is going to happen or they're both going to happen. You're going to have to ride a guy longer than you have to, or you're going to have to make someone do something that they haven't this year. Somebody that's only thrown a handful of innings, maybe like what Georgia Southern has done with Hayden Harris lately. He gets the start, his first ever postseason start against Troy. He'd only thrown 25 innings all year. Goes 3 2/3 shutout, benefited from 2 double plays. The line drive with first and second in that 3rd inning was huge to be able to get him through that scoreless outing. But if you're a staff, even if you haven't thrown very much, like Rodney Hennon has said, mostly from a hitting standpoint, it's all hands on deck.
Yeah.
I mean, we've become accustomed to Ty Fisher being Ty Fisher. Jalen Payton doesn't give up a whole lot of hits if he can find a way to command his pitches. He is a really effective guy. Jay Thompson can do anything that you need him to. We've seen what Thomas Higgins can do. Didn't see Thomas Ross, Brooks Gorman. Didn't even see Javon Ray in the tournament, but that's somebody who has started before. Danny Madden has been a late inning guy and a starter. You have to look down and see, who can I use where and how much can I get out of you? Because look at this. It's a regional for the first time in 8 years. You've never hosted one, so you can bet that the Eagles are going to do everything that they possibly can to make sure that they're playing the next weekend in a super.
It's going to be one fun weekend here in Statesboro as Georgia Southern hosts the regionals here in Statesboro. J.I. Clements Stadium, Jack Stallings Field, the host for a NCAA baseball regional.
And that is one I wish was still alive to see this because of what he built over almost a quarter century here, taking this program back to a College World Series in 1990. I know his name is on the warning track behind home plate, but how proud would Coach Stallings be of this?
Funny you mentioned that. The first thing I saw this morning when I woke up, I was going through social media of everybody reacting to the fact that Georgia Southern was hosting a regional. The first one I saw was his grandson Brad that popped up. But this is going to be a fun weekend in Statesboro. You've got 4 really good college baseball teams here in Statesboro. Come out, support not only Georgia Southern, but college baseball as a whole. Really good college baseball going to be played this weekend. 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock on Friday, 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock on Saturday, 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock on Sunday. If necessary, on Monday will be a 6 o'clock first pitch at J.I. Clement Stadium. Georgia Southern will play the 7 o'clock game against UNCG on Friday. Texas Tech and Notre Dame matching up for the first game of the Statesboro Regional on Friday.
And before we wrap up, parking and ticketing information is online, gseagles.com. You can call the ticket office at 1-800-GSU-WINS. They were closed today because it was Memorial Day, but you can get all the information you need, make the purchases you need to. Bring somebody, bring a lot of people, get as many tickets as you can, blow this thing out because this is something that has never happened before, and let's hope that this is the start of something that we get a chance to do a lot more. I can't wait for this.
This is going to be a fun weekend and historic weekend for Georgia Southern and Georgia Southern baseball, and already a historic program for Eagle baseball. But until this weekend for the 2022 Statesboro Regional of the NCAA Tournament, for the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, this is Colin Lacy saying so long, everybody.
Been listening to Inside Eagle Nation, powered by Learfield, the official podcast of Georgia Southern Athletics.